Something happens when a woman reaches her 35, 42 years old. It's not a smooth change, it's not a natural evolution. It is an internal earthquake. It is not discreet. It's not silent. And it's definitely not harmless. The shock that no one prepares you to face. One day, she is the commander of the reality that you have built together. Supervising balanced meals for picky kids, managing school calendars and medical appointments, organizing family trips where the goal is to make memories, not necessarily live, genuine moments. She is the executive director of the home, and her schedule is the sacred contract that keeps everything running. The next day you come home and the principal resigned. The contract was torn up. She is browsing social networks in the early hours of the morning, her face bathed in that bluish luminosity of the smartphone, her finger moving in a compulsive and infinite cycle. Suddenly, she is obsessed with skin treatments involving substances with impossible names, buying pieces of clothing 3 sizes below the current one that hang in the closet still with a label, as memories of a body that no longer exists and reconnecting with people she hasn't seen in decades, figures from a previous life where she was simply herself, not someone's mother or someone's lady. You stand there in the middle of the chaos of what was once familiar, holding bags from the market that she didn't even remember ordering, looking at a stranger wearing your wife's skin. 1. The silent awakening. The transformation does not announce its arrival. There is no set milestone, no siren blaring to warn you that life as you know it is about to implode. It's gradual at first, so subtle that you mistake it for tiredness, for work stress, for the heavy routine of 2 decades of doing the same things. But something is brewing beneath the surface, a restlessness that has no name. A feeling of suffocation that cannot be explained because technically everything is fine. The house is in order, the bills are paid, the children are healthy, the marriage does not have serious fights. So why this crazy desire to run? Why this tightness in her chest when she looks back on the next 30 years and sees only more of the same? Jung said that there is a moment in life when the human psyche requires a turn of 180 degrees. Not because something is wrong externally, but because something is dying internally. The first half of life is about building. Career, family, social identity, security. You build a solid structure brick by brick, following the rules that society has taught you. House, offspring, stability. You become what you need to be for everything to work. But when the second half comes, something inside the mind starts screaming. He begins to question. He begins to refuse to continue sleeping. And for women, this process is brutal because they have spent entire decades being everything to everyone. Mother who sacrifices sleep to take care of babies. Wife who adapts her life to her husband's schedules and needs. A professional who needs to prove twice as much to be taken seriously. Daughter who takes care of her parents who are aging. Friend who is always available. Birthday organizer, doctor on emotional duty, driver, cook, unpaid therapist. It fragmented into 1,000 pieces to fit the expectations of each role. And now suddenly the bill arrives. The psyche takes its toll on decades of self-effacement. The body also begins to speak. The hormonal changes of perimenopause are not just physical. They unearth emotions that have been buried for years. Anger that was swallowed to keep the peace. Sadness that was ignored because there was no time to feel. Frustration that was stifled because complaining doesn't solve anything. All of this comes back to the surface at once. And when he comes back, he doesn't come asking for permission. It has been breaking doors. She wakes up one day and realizes that she doesn't know who she is. She spent so much time being the version of herself that others needed, that she lost touch with the real person who lives inside. She looks in the mirror and sees an exhausted actress who has played the same role for so long that she forgot she was acting. And now the play is over. The audience left. And she's alone on stage with no script, no character, not knowing what to do with the frightening freedom of finally being able to be herself. But does being herself mean what? She doesn't know. And that terrifies us, because acknowledging that you've lived 40 years of the wrong life, or at least someone else's life, is too painful to process all at once. So it starts slowly, with small rebellions. She buys something she always wanted but never allowed herself to. She cancels an appointment that she would normally fulfill out of obligation. She says no for the first time in years. And every small act of autonomy feeds a hunger that was dormant, a hunger for real life, by real choices, because it exists as a whole person, not as a function. The husband does not realize at first because the changes are small. She's a little quieter, a little further away, but he attributes it to work, fatigue, age, He does not understand that he is witnessing the beginning of an irreversible process, that the woman he knew is dying, and someone else, someone he never really knew, is being born in her place. And this new person has no interest in continuing to live the old life. 2. The shadow that returns to collect. Throughout the first half of life, you hide parts of yourself. It is not a conscious choice, it is social survival. You learn very quickly that certain parts of your personality are not welcome, that some emotions need to be swallowed, that certain desires are inadequate. So you push all of that into the basement of the psyche. Lock the door, throw away the key, and he continues to live as if those parts did not exist. Jung called this the shadow. Everything that you have rejected, repressed, denied about yourself in order to be accepted, loved, respected. For women, the shadow is usually giant, because from a young age they learn not to be too much. Don't be too aggressive. Don't be too ambitious. Don't be too sexual. Don't be too selfish. Don't be too emotional. Don't be too independent. The list of no's is endless. Then she cuts pieces of herself as if she were pruning a tree to fit into a small pot. And for years, decades even, it works. She adapts. It performs. She fulfills the role well, but the shadow does not die. It stays down there, accumulating energy, growing up in the dark, feeding off every time you said yes when you wanted to say no, every time you smiled when you wanted to scream, every time you pretended to be satisfied when you were dying of boredom. The shadow is patient. She waits. And when middle age arrives, when psychological defenses begin to weaken, when the body and mind can no longer hold on to so much repressed, it bursts. And when it bursts, it's not pretty. It's chaotic. It's scary. It's destructive. Suddenly, the woman who has always been sweet begins to speak brutal truths. The one who has always been patient loses patience with everything and everyone. The one who has always put others first becomes selfish overnight. The one that has always been predictable starts doing things completely off script. To outsiders, it looks like insanity. It looks like a crisis. It looks like self-sabotage. But in fact, it is integration. It is the psyche trying to become whole again, bringing together all the parts that have been exiled. She discovers old angers that she could never express. He remembers dreams that he abandoned because they were not practical. He feels desires that he has learned to consider shameful. And all of this comes with enormous guilt, because she was taught that feeling these things makes her a bad person. But the truth is that these emotions, these desires, these rejected parts are as much a part of her as anything else, and ignoring them any longer is simply no longer possible. The husband usually doesn't understand what's going on because he married the edited version of her. He met the woman who had already cut off the inconvenient parts. He fell in love with the performance, not the whole person. And now that the whole person is emerging, he doesn't recognize it. He wants back the woman he once knew. But this woman was a lie. Not a malicious lie, but a lie necessary to survive in a world that punishes entire women. The shadow also brings brutal honesty. She stops pretending. Stop making a good face. Stop swallowing insults to maintain harmony. And that scares everyone around because they were comfortable with the domesticated version of her, the version that didn't cause any problems. The version that kept everything running smoothly. Now it's causing problems. He is questioning everything. It is refusing agreements that it has accepted for years, and no one knows how to deal with it. But for her, this is not destruction. It is liberation. It's finally being able to breathe after decades of holding your breath. It's taking off a mask that was glued to the skin. Hurts? Yes, hurt, very much. But continuing to wear the mask hurts even more. If this message resonated with you, it's not by accident. You're entering the storm Jung spoke of, the one that awakens the true self. If you want to understand this transformation deeply, you'll find the link to the Jung method in the first comment. 3. When the mask breaks, you spend your whole life building an image. It's not vanity, it's a survival strategy. Since you were a child, you realize that there is a version of yourself that works best in the world, that receives approval, that avoids conflicts. So you adjust your personality as if you were sculpting a statue. Take a little here, add a little there. And eventually that statue is so perfect that you forget that it's just a facade. Jung had a name for it, persona. The social mask you wear to navigate the world. The problem is not having a persona. The problem is when you completely identify with it. For women, this is especially dangerous because society offers very rigid molds. The perfect mother, the devoted wife, A competent but non-threatening professional. The list is impossible to fulfill, but they try anyway. And for years, this works reasonably well. The mask ensures that you are accepted, valued, loved, but there is an invisible price being paid every day. Every time you swallow an opinion that is not popular, every time you laugh at a joke you didn't find funny, each time you act according to what is expected instead of what you really want, the distance between who you are and who you pretend to be is widening, and that distance hurts. When middle age arrives, the mask begins to weigh down. Literally, like carrying a 50-pound stone on your back every day. You wake up exhausted not because you slept poorly, but because maintaining performance is exhausting, and suddenly you can't take it anymore. He can't stand smiling when he's sad anymore. He can no longer agree when he disagrees. He can't stand being nice anymore when he's angry. The mask cracks, and when it cracks, everyone panics. Because the people around you were comfortable with the masked version of you. They made agreements with that version, and now you're breaking the contract. It's showing parts that you've always kept hidden. She's saying things she's always kept to herself. But the truth is that it was never you. It was just the version of you that they could digest. The husband feels this intensely because he married the persona. He met you already masked. Maybe on the first few dates you showed some glimpses of the real person. But when the relationship got serious, the mask became permanent. He has grown to love the edited version, the version that doesn't cause problems. And now that version is disappearing. It feels like you're becoming someone else, but you're really just stopping pretending. Breaking reveals how much you were doing to please others. How many decisions have you made based on what would be best for everyone but you? How many dreams have you shelved because they were not practical? How much of your life was lived on autopilot, following a script that someone else wrote? And when you realize that, anger comes, but it is not a destructive anger. It's an anger that wakes you up. And here's the part that no one tells you. Taking off your mask doesn't mean you'll become a horrible person. It doesn't mean that you will abandon everyone and become selfish. It just means that you will stop lying. He will stop performing. You'll start making choices based on who you really are, not who you should be. And yes, some people are going to hate it, especially those that benefited from its performance. But others will finally get to know you for real. The transition is brutal because you lose the identity you've built for decades. For a while, you are lost, without a mask but without knowing who the person under it is. It's a frightening void, but it's also a rare opportunity, the chance to rediscover yourself, to build an identity based on internal truth. And when you finally meet that real person, everything changes. 4. The ego dies at 40. There's a comforting idea that you get better with age, that it is becoming wiser, more balanced, and that's true in a way. But what no one mentions is that to get there, a part of you needs to die first. And it's not a pretty metaphorical death. It is a violent psychological death. What dies is the ego, or at least the inflated version you built in the first half of your life. The ego is the center of your consciousness. It's the me that you think you are. And for the first 40 years, you spend all that time building that me, conquering things, accumulating identities. I am a mother. I am a wife. I am a professional. Each achievement adds a layer. Each role you play well increases structure. You look at it with pride. You are somebody. You matter because you do things, because you are useful. But in middle age, that structure begins to crumble. Children grow up and no longer need you as much. Work loses its meaning. Marriage becomes a mechanical routine. And suddenly you realize that all that identity was grounded in external things, in temporary roles. And when these things start to fade, panic comes. Because if you are no longer those things, then who are you? Jung said that the second half of life should be about finding internal meaning, not external meaning. About building an identity that does not depend on achievements or social approval. But making this transition requires you to let go of the old version of yourself. And letting go isn't easy when you've spent decades investing in that version. It feels like a loss. It looks like failure. For women, this is tricky because so much of their identity has been built around caring for others. Their value was linked to how much they were needed. And when people stop needing it so much, when their children leave home, when their husbands no longer need constant support, they are lost. The purpose that kept them going disappears. Who am I when I am not useful to anyone? The death of the ego brings out all the lies you have told yourself, all the times you pretended to be satisfied when you were dying inside, all the illusions you held onto because the truth was too painful, And now, without the distractions of hectic life, without the papers that kept you busy, you are left alone with the truth. And the truth usually is you're not happy. You're not living the life you wanted. You don't even know what you want anymore because you spent so much time wanting what was expected. The husband does not understand this crisis because the male process is usually different. Men build their identities mainly around their careers, and when this crisis hits them, it is usually later in retirement. But for women, the crisis comes sooner because their identity is more fragmented, spread across multiple roles that begin to change simultaneously. And here is the paradox. The death of the ego is not bad. In fact, it is necessary, because that inflated ego was holding you back from growing. It was keeping you stuck in a limited version of who you could be. He was focused on keeping up appearances, on fulfilling expectations. But he was not interested in truth. He was not interested in authenticity. When the ego dies, what is born in the place is something deeper, more true, less concerned with what others think and more connected with what you really feel. Less focused on external achievements and more interested in internal peace. But to get there, you need to cross the desert. You need to go through the grief of who you thought you were, and letting her die so that something new can be born is the bravest thing you can do. 5. The anger nobody understands. She explodes because of a dish in the sink, because of a silly question about dinner, because of nothing. And everyone stares at her as if she's gone crazy. But that anger is not about the dishes. It's not about dinner. It's about 20 years of small humiliation swallowed up, of ignored disrespect, of neglected needs. It's about whole decades of never mind that have accumulated until they overflowed. Female anger in midlife is one of the most misunderstood forces in the universe, because it doesn't fit the script. Women should be patient, understanding, tolerant. When a woman finally loses her temper after 40 years of keeping it all together, everyone acts like she's the problem, as if she were exaggerating, as if it were dramatic, unstable, irrational. But the truth is that this anger is absolutely rational. It is the natural response of an organism that has been exploited to the limit, who gave and gave without receiving back, who sacrificed himself until there was nothing left. And now the body, the mind, the whole soul are in rebellion. They are shouting, "Enough! I can't take it anymore." Jung talked about the importance of integrating all emotions, including those we consider negative. Anger is not your enemy. It is a message. It's your internal alert system telling you that your boundaries have been breached, that their needs have been ignored for too long. But women have been taught their entire lives to be wary of their own anger, to see it as something ugly, destructive. So for decades she swallows. She swallows when her husband makes a joke about her in front of his friends. She swallows it when her children treat the house as a hotel and she is a maid. It swallows when at work it is interrupted, ignored, left behind. It swallows when its opinion is disregarded. She swallows when she's exhausted, but no one asks if she needs help. Every time you swallow it, the anger doesn't go away. It goes down to the stomach and stays there, accumulating, fermenting, growing. And when it finally explodes, it's not proportional to the trigger. Of course not. Because it's not about the trigger. It's about everything. It's about every time she said yes when she wanted to say no. Every time she smiled when she wanted to scream. Every time she put everyone in front of herself. Each time she was kind when she should have been firm. The husband usually does not understand where so much anger comes from. He thinks, but I didn't do anything so serious. And it's true, he probably didn't do a very serious thing. There were 1,000 small things. It was assuming that she would always be there. It was not realizing how much invisible work she does. It was not valuing the things she sacrificed. There were years of emotional neglect disguised as normality. Anger also comes from the perception of wasted time. She looks back and sees decades spent living for others. And he looks ahead and realizes that he has no more 40 years left. Time is running out, and she doesn't want to spend the time she has left doing more of the same. This urgency makes the anger even more intense. It is anger mixed with despair, afraid of dying without having really lived. Many around try to pathologize this anger. They say it's menopause, which are hormones. And yes, hormonal changes intensify emotions, but anger is not caused by hormones. She was already there. The hormones just took off the lid that kept her contained. Treating it as a medical symptom is a way of invalidating something legitimate. What she really needs is not to be calmed down. It is to be heard. It is to have your grievances taken seriously. It's that people recognize that yes, she is right to be furious, that the way she was treated for years is not right. But rarely does she receive this. Most of the time they receive defensiveness, minimization, or are accused of destroying the family. Anger, when allowed and channeled correctly, is transformative. It energizes changes that have been delayed for years. It breaks crystallized patterns. It sets boundaries that should have been set a long time ago. She is the force that finally says no more. And while it's uncomfortable for everyone around, it's absolutely necessary for her to be able to rebuild her life in a sustainable and true way. 6. Individuation. The call impossible to ignore. Jung had a word for the process of becoming who you really are. Individuation. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. Gather all the parts of you that have been separated, rejected, hidden. It's about stopping living through masks and roles and starting to live through your true self. And in middle age, that call becomes impossible to ignore. The first half of his life was about adaptation. You've learned to fit in, to be functional. But the second half should be about differentiation, about detaching yourself from collective expectations and discovering who you are beyond all labels. For women, this is revolutionary because they have spent their entire lives being defined in relation to other people. Someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone's mother, never just themselves. The process is deeply uncomfortable because it requires you to question everything. Your beliefs, your values, your choices, your relationships. Nothing escapes scrutiny. You begin to realize how many things you believed, not because they were true for you, but because you absorbed them from the environment. How many rules did you follow, not because they made sense, but because that's how things were done? And as you start this questioning, the people around you get nervous, because their transformation threatens the systems in which they are comfortable. If you stop accepting unfair deals, other people need to take on responsibilities that were previously yours. If you stop being predictable, they lose their sense of control. Their individuation forces everyone around them to look at their own lives. And not everyone wants to do that. Marriage usually does not survive because it is built on foundations that do not hold two whole people. It was built on complementarity. She takes care of the house, he provides. She manages emotions, he makes decisions. When he begins to individuate, these artificial divisions no longer work. She wants to renegotiate everything. And if the husband is unwilling or unable to go through his own process, the relationship implodes. Individuation also means facing one's own mortality. In middle age, you can no longer pretend that you have infinite time. You see the end on the horizon. And this creates an urgency. A healthy desperation to live before it's too late, to do the things you put off, to say the things you kept silent. There is no more time to live through rehearsals. This is life. Now. This process is not selfish, although it is often accused of being. It's self-care in the deepest sense. It is recognizing that you are responsible for your own existence, that no one will live your life for you, that in the end, you need to give yourself an account for how you spent your days. And if you've spent all of them serving other people's projects, neglecting your own potential, betraying your own dreams, this account will be too painful. Jung said that those who do not individuate themselves live a life by half. He remains trapped in collective patterns, repeating scripts that are not his own, and this can work for a while. But eventually the psyche charges. It creates symptoms, depression, anxiety, physical illnesses, relationships that fall apart, existential crises. These are all ways for the psyche to scream, "Wake up, you're wasting your life." For the woman in middle age, individuation often means dismantling the life she has built and rebuilding something new. Not because the old life was objectively bad, but because it no longer fits. It's like trying to wear children's clothes on an adult body. Technically, it's clothing, but it is not useful. Hurt, restricts. And as much as everyone around says that the clothes are beautiful, that you should keep them, your body knows that you can't do it anymore. The path is lonely. Because no one can do it for you. No one can tell you who you really are. You need to figure it out on your own. And in the process, you'll probably lose people who could only love you in the old version, but you will also find yourself. And in the end, that's the only thing that really matters, because you can survive losing other people, but you can't survive losing yourself. 7. Why the husband sees nothing coming. He swears it was out of nowhere. One day everything was fine, the next day she wants a divorce. He looks back trying to find the moment when everything fell apart and can't. Because from his point of view, there was no moment. Life followed its normal course. Nothing has changed. Except it changed everything, but he wasn't paying attention. The truth is that it had been signaling for years. Small comments that he ignored, subtle changes in behavior that he didn't notice, conversations she tried to start and he diverted, requests for help that he did not take seriously. She didn't wake up one day determined to blow up the wedding. She was dying little by little, trying to resurrect, dying again until she finally gave up trying. But men are usually trained not to notice emotional nuances, to focus on the concrete, the objective, the functional. So while the house is working, the bills are paid, the children are alive, he assumes that everything is fine. He does not notice the woman languishing emotionally because she continues to perform her duties. And for him, performed function means that there is no problem. He also doesn't understand that her silence is not peace. It's giving up. There was a time when she fought, complained, tried to change things, and he probably found it tiring, dramatic. Then she stopped, and he felt relief, finally peace. But that peace was her drowning in silence. It was her shutting down parts of herself to maintain harmony. And when she finally stops doing that, when she goes back to making noise, he thinks she's changed. But she just stopped pretending. The husband has generally built his life around the predictability of it. He knows she's going to be there, that she will take care of things, that she will adapt. He didn't do it out of malice. He did it because she allowed it. Because she took on those roles and played them so well that he never had to question the arrangement. And now that she's questioning, he feels betrayed. Like she's changing the rules in the middle of the game. But the rules have always been unfair. He just didn't realize why they worked in his favor. He had a life where he could focus on his career, hobbies, personal interests, while she held all the invisible infrastructure that made it possible. And because it was invisible, he assumed it happened alone, that there was no cost. That did not require sacrifice. When she finally explains what she's feeling, he usually doesn't understand. He hears the words but can't process it, because from his point of view, he was a good husband. He worked, he provided, he didn't cheat. He was not violent. In his paradigm, this is enough. But for her, this is the basic minimum, not enough. She wants real partnership. She wants to be seen as a complete person, not as a function. He wants your needs to matter as much as his. He also did not go through the transformation process that she is going through. He remains who he always was. And from his point of view, this is stability. It is to be trustworthy. But for her, it's stagnation. It is a refusal to grow. And the more it changes, the more the distance between them increases. Until one day they are two completely different people who share the same space but not the same reality. The tragedy is that in most cases, by the time he finally realizes the gravity of the situation, it's already too late. She has already made the decision. She has already processed the grief of the marriage internally. He has already prepared for the separation. And when he's finally willing to change, to go to therapy, to really listen, she no longer has the energy to try. He has already given all the chances he had to give, and he gets confused. Because now that he's willing, she doesn't want it anymore. But he was only willing when he realized he was going to lose. Not because he genuinely understood what she had been asking for all these years. It is a change motivated by fear of loss, not real growth. And she feels it. He feels that it is too late. That she can't come back. That moving forward alone is less painful than continuing in a relationship where you had to beg to be seen. 8. The price of living someone else's life. There is an invisible cost to living a life that is not yours. You don't realize it at first because you're too busy building, raising children, sustaining marriage, advancing in the career, fulfilling expectations. You think you're doing it right. Who is being responsible, mature adult? And it is. But the price is being charged silently, on your body, in your mind, in your soul. The first price is disconnection from oneself. You spend so much time being what others need that you forget who you are. Your preferences disappear. Their desires become confused. Your opinions become echoes of what's acceptable, not what you actually think. You become a shell working on automatic. And when someone asks you what you want, you don't know how to answer. Because it's been so long since no one asked that you've stopped asking too. The second price is health. The body holds everything that the mind tries to ignore. The anger you swallowed turns into gastritis. The sadness you have repressed turns into depression. The stress you've normalized turns into chronic anxiety. The pains you ignored because you didn't have time to get sick finally bring you down, and then you find that you can't function like you used to, that your body is on strike, refusing to continue. The third price is repentance, not the regret of the things you did, but the things you didn't do, of the dreams he shelved, of the opportunities he turned down, of the versions of you that never had the courage to be. You look back and see a lifetime spent in standby mode, waiting for the right moment that never came, waiting for permission that no one was going to give, waiting for the perfect circumstances that don't exist. Jung said that the greatest tragedy is not death. It is reaching the end of life and realizing that you have never lived, that you spent your days running a script written by other people, that you were a talented actress playing a role that wasn't yours, and that in the end, the person you could have been died without ever having had a chance to exist. For women, this price is especially high because they are socialized to sacrifice themselves. It is presented as a virtue, like love, as a duty, and they absorb it so deeply that they feel guilty when they finally try to live for themselves, as if choosing one's own life was selfish, as if taking care of oneself was a betrayal of those who depend on it. But the truth is, you can't keep emptying yourself to fill others indefinitely. Eventually, there is nothing left. And when there is nothing left, you are of no use to yourself or to anyone else. You become a ghost walking, physically present but absent in all other senses, and the people around you start complaining that you've changed, that you're not the same anymore. But you haven't changed. You just stop pretending you still exist. Marriage that ends in middle age usually doesn't end because she stopped loving her. It ends because she finally started to love herself. And he realized that you can't do both at the same time in that specific arrangement, that the way the relationship was structured required its disappearance. And she is no longer willing to disappear. Rebuilding after decades of living someone else's life is terrifying. Because you don't know who you are, you need to discover yourself as if you were a teenager again, but now in your early 40s. You need to test things, experiment, without the energy of youth, but with the urgency of those who know that time is running out. It's uncomfortable. It's lonely. It's scary. But it's also the most honest thing you can do. And in the end, the price of living your own life can include losing things, losing the marriage, losing friendships, losing the approval of people you love. But the price of not living your own life is losing yourself, and that's a loss you can't recover. Because you only have one life, and there comes a time when you need to decide, am I going to live it or am I just going to watch it go by?